Let's talk to God. One more thing, like, subscribe, and share. Come on, let's talk to God. Woo!
Well, good evening, everybody. Hey, it's Cutler here, the Let's Talk to Cutler broadcast, the Let's Talk to Cutler vlog, the Let's Talk to Cutler program. And you all know I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. So if this is your first time stopping by, do me a favor, hit the brakes, pull over to the side, stop, give me only 1,800 seconds. That's all I need. If you are visiting, if you're stopping by for the first time, let me just remind you that this channel is about motivation. It's about inspiration. It's about offering hope. It is about a way to see how we can show up a little bit better tomorrow than we did today. There's a lot of bad news out there. There's a lot of bad news on social media. There's a lot of negativity out there, but not these Tuesdays and Thursdays when we share this 1,800 seconds together. I'm so thankful because it is already March the 3rd. The month of March is moving right on, and we're marching along with it. Hey, by the way, here's a shout out to all of the March babies, but here's also a shout out to Women's History Month. So happy Women's History Month observation and observance. Of course, we just came off the heels of Black History Month, and now it's Women's History Month. So I salute all of the women who join this channel, all of the women who will catch the replay, all of those of you who support me and bid me well and wish me well and all those sorts of things. So I don't have a hat on, but if I had a hat, I'd tip it and say my hat's off to you. But listen, I want to say thank you so much for joining this channel. Again, what we've been talking about is, most recently, we've been trying to talk about how do we handle life at its most intense moments? How do we do life before life does us? How do we handle those moments that would pull us under, those moments that would drown us, those moments that would suck the energy out of us, those moments that would just really knock the air, those moments would just take the breath away? How do we handle those moments? And we've been talking about it within the context of this book right here, When I Am Overwhelmed, How to Handle Life at Its Most Intense Moments. Of course, we've said some things like, make sure that you give your emotions a voice. Make sure that you know how to do that. And then we said there are times you just have to be honest with where you are. So we've talked about all of those things. I'm going to get into that. But let me just say, before I do, I have to shout out the LTTC VIPs. What and who are the LTTC VIPs, Cutler? They are the Let's Talk to Cutler, very important people, of course, but you all know all of you are important. Each of you is important in your own way, and I'm so thankful for those of you who have been with me for the long ride. Thank you so much. Those of you who are just joining, thank you. So again, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and then click on that notification bell. Why? Because it lets you know whenever I've gone live, whenever I have uploaded or I am uploading new content. So again, thank you. By the way, do me a favor. If you're coming into the chat with me tonight so I can see you and you chat back with me, go ahead and do a thumbs up on the conversation, because it lets YouTube know that you enjoy our dialogue, and it lets me know that you're encouraged by the content that I provide. I want to shout out the LTTC VIPs for this evening. They tend to be the first 3 people who jump into the chat. So if you want to be an LTTC VIP and you want me to shout you out, jump into the chat. Beat the other people to the chat. But while you're coming in, make sure that you say hi to everybody else, because I'm from the country. I'm from the South. We just do that. We speak when we walk into a room. When you walk into a room, you speak. So let me just speak to all of you. Let me just shout out the LTTC VIPs this evening. And they are Mick Diner, who says, good evening, all. Good evening to you, my friend. And then who else? Annie Cutler. I love you. Annie says, let's ride. And then there is Tracy Johnson, who says, hey, everyone, good evening. I love the fact that you all come in and you say hi to everybody. I love the fact that we do that, because this reminds us that we are a community, and we are a community of winners. And that's what we do. So for those of you, yes, fabulous me twice in 1 week. Good to see everybody. I should just shout out, just start yelling out to people, Jed and Paula D, MV, Linda, all of you all. But you all, I want us to take off and follow up our conversation as we're talking about how to handle life at its most intense moments. And we've been reading from this book. Chapter 7 really talks about making sure that you use your mouth, your mind, and your heart. It really talks about, it speaks to using everything that is a part of you. It speaks to being able to recognize what is within you. It speaks to being able to recognize the value that you have and not letting other people devalue you or deface you or depreciate what you bring to the table, what you possess. Because what I want to remind all of you and each of us is that when we were called out of eternity onto this thing called earth, we were given a certain set of skills, a certain set of gifts, a certain set of abilities, and yours are just as important as everybody else's. I often say that the picture is not complete until your piece is added to the puzzle. It's not complete. So don't ever let anybody think that their piece is more important than yours. That's just not the way it works. Because I was having a conversation with one of my relatives today, and we have what I call kitchen conversations, and we were reminding each other that people will claw at you because there's something about you that they see. There's something about you that intimidates them. There's something about you that they want. There's something about you that does not make them comfortable. So when that happens, I often say that people will chip at your diamond. They would chip at you. In fact, they chip at your emerald just to make their diamond shine. We don't have to do that. We don't have to do that at all. So this channel is where we come to be refortified and refueled and reinvigorated and all of that kind of stuff, right? To see what nuggets, Cutler, can we take with us into tomorrow. One of the things that I want us to take into tomorrow from this conversation is a recap that says, don't forget about the young people. Don't forget that they become overwhelmed too. And that's just a recap from the past two conversations. If you've missed that, please go back and catch the replay. We talked about some things, some real stuff. We talked about how they are sometimes overlooked. They're overlooked by family. They're overlooked by friends. And we said in one of our conversations that youth only lasts but a short while. And the challenge is that they have but a short while to build a foundation that they have to stand on for the rest of their lives. Think about it. All of us are products of the foundation that we built. And many times we spend the years trying to reshore and shore up that foundation because it has cracks in it. It has holes in it. It has places, as one poem says, that they never seen the light of day. But we often have to shore up our foundation, and it is okay to do that. We come back here, we come to this space, we come to this place, we go to therapy, we go to counseling, we have support groups, we do all that kind of stuff. We have family members with whom we can talk and those sorts of things, because it is about shoring up our foundation. I, for one, clearly recognize that my foundation often needs to be it's just like a porch. It often needs to be re-cemented. It needs to be regrounded. It sometimes needs to have the rough edges smoothed. It needs to have the surface rebalanced. All of that happens to your foundation because you don't want to topple over. You don't want to topple over. You don't want to topple over emotionally. You don't want to topple over spiritually. You don't want to topple over holistically, any kind of way. All right, so listen. Not only have we spoken about the young people, but chapter 7 in this book is dedicated to the elderly as well. If you don't have it, you don't need to join the conversation. It helps. Run it over to Amazon.com. And again, those of you who have been with me, you know, this is not about pushing these books. This is my 6th book, but it's not about pushing this book. It's about giving us a tool that we can use, a tool that we can have. So if you don't have it, it's okay. You don't need it to join the conversation, because this is time with the author. Some of my friends said, please read, make sure that you read. So I'm going to do that. But I just want to remind us this evening that elderly people become overwhelmed too. They become overwhelmed, and they have an entire set of things that will overwhelm this that we have yet to encounter, that we have yet to deal with. The same way the young folk have their own issues, their own matters, their arsenal of things that will overwhelm them. The same is true for the elderly. The very same is true for the elderly. I want to pose this question to you. When was the last time that you actually had a real conversation with someone who was at least 20 years your senior? When was the last time you all? So let me know that. I want to see that in the chat from you. When was the last time you had a conversation with someone who was 20 years your senior? And for those of you who may be 60, 70 plus, and you may say, well, 70 plus and 60 years, 20 years my senior, you're thinking, there may not be a whole lot of them around me. But okay, so when was the last time you had a conversation? If you're in your 70s, when was the last time you had a conversation with someone 10, 15 years your senior? And not just for their wisdom, not just for their counsel, not just for their advice, but to check on them, to see how they were doing, to see how they were maneuvering, to see how they were managing, to see how they were handling this pandemic, to see if they were alone, to see if they were lonely, to see if they needed anything, to see if they still realized that they mattered, to see if they still recognize that they have a place in this thing called humanity. When was the last time you checked on them? When was the last time you checked on them? I have neighbors who are 86, neighbors who are 90, neighbors who are older than I am, and I make sure I check on them. We have to check on them. Many of you checked in with me last week, and I told you all that I was thrilled because I was home with my mother and my grandmother, 2 generations ahead of me. Yes, fabulous me, mama does count. Mama counts, grandmama counts. They all matter. So I want to go to a page in the book after I talked about our young people. And I said, the one thing that we need to teach them, remember, just as a recap, I said, one of the things we need to teach our young people is how to think. That means how to rationalize, how to reason, and how to properly put their thoughts together. And then we talked about teaching them how to trust, how to be able to open their hearts and find a space when somebody creates a safe space for them to walk therein. And we said that we have to model that for them because we don't want our young people who are most vulnerable being taken advantage of, right? So we have to teach them how to think, how to trust, and then how to talk. How not to let their emotions command them, but they command their emotions. So I want to then go on to the next paragraph where I pose this. As I consider the demographics of those who are susceptible to overwhelming moments, not only do I think of young people, but my mind then goes to the opposite end of the age spectrum, to the elderly. The elderly, as a population, the elderly is a very special population in that they possess the wisdom of the ages as well as childlike qualities. They're often preyed upon and targeted because of their vulnerabilities. And here is why I say make sure that you check on them. Do you not know that the scammers and the hackers and all of those people and the spammers, they target the elderly? I can't tell you the number of times that I've seen older people online often preyed upon by people who will pretend to be them. And then you get these messages through social media and it sounds like that they're just sending out a random conversation, that they're just saying something. And then the next thing you know, the person with whom you're familiar will say something like, oh, did I tell you about this investment strategy that I'm a part of? Someone has robbed their social media identity and has preyed upon them. I remember my father, before he passed, my father would frequently call me and say, one of my grandchildren called me and said, "Granddaddy, I need your help." And my father would call me and say, "Well, where is," and he would ask for that particular grandchild. "Where's that particular grandchild?" And I would tell him, and he said, "Oh, well, I got a call from him or her telling me that they were in an opposite state, not just in a different city, but in an opposite state." And I said, "Daddy, that is just scammers and hackers and all those sorts of people preying on you. And it is a shame before the true and living God that people would do that." So it is true. What I wrote in the book, they are often preyed upon and targeted because of their vulnerabilities. You all, as people become older, it is quite often, it is quite frequent that their reflexes slow down. They have the same capacity to reason, but it is not done as speedily as they once did. And people would take advantage of that. People walking around knocking on people's doors, making phone calls, sending emails, sending junk mail. We have to be careful about that. And they are not all you are. And this is why I pray that we check on them, because they are not always as savvy as some of us, not savvy to the point where they catch on and realize that this doesn't make sense. It doesn't pass the smell test. Something is wrong here. So we have to be careful. We don't want them surrendering their personal information. And so we have to check on K Sharp. You all are right. We have to check on our parents. We have to check on our grandparents. Juanita, I'm sorry that it happened. I see what you're saying. The same thing happened to your mother regarding your son. Right. People saying that your son was in an accident in a different state. Because, grandparents they worry. They are concerned. And they don't stop to say, oh my God, let me see. Do I need to send you money? All the sorts of things. We have to be careful. You all, please check on them. Absolutely. All these social media platforms. People, I had a relative who called me because this particular relative knows how close I am to one of my uncles. And the relative called me and said, is your uncle okay? Because I keep getting these messages that seem uncharacteristic of him. So you got to be careful. You've got to be careful. Ray Della, I think that's excellent information. I think that's excellent counsel and advice. Ray Della says, I tell my mom every day not to give anyone any information. Tell them, you want something, you have to speak to me. I think it's wonderful. And you all, I think these comments are most needed, because as people are going back and doing the replay, maybe they see that it's just not Cutler talking. Cutler's just not espousing this as his single experience, but many of us are aware of this. And so we have to be very careful. Why? Because if you have a senior citizen, not just a senior citizen, but just an older person, period, who may be living at home alone, and many times just for the sake of having company, just for the sake of spending the day hearing another voice, just for the sake of spending some portion of the day seeing another body, they become vulnerable and they become preyed upon. Let me keep reading, but I have such compassion and such conviction for making sure that they are taken care of. And I share that conviction. I share that compassion with us all. Why? Because one day, hopefully, prayerfully, we will end up in that population, and we will want done for us what we today are doing for somebody else. Envy, I get it. Grandparents receive calls about buying insurance. All of these scams. You'll please continue to populate the chats with the various kinds of scams that people in your space, in your circle, in your family have been targeted for. All right, I want to keep reading because they are often preyed upon and targeted because of their vulnerabilities. Many times, listen to this, you all. Many times the paths of their lives will venture into solitude and isolation. Quite often they feel useless. Having given life, family, church, society their best years, they get to a place where they feel useless. They feel of no value. And they will say things like, my best days are behind me. I've done the best I can. And they feel as though they have no value. I'm so serious when I say elderly people become overwhelmed too. Can you imagine getting to a place where you feel like, I've done all that I can for society? There's nothing else that I can do. I've given everything. I've given my life. I've given all to my family, my church. I've given my whole life to my family, to my church, to society. I've given them my best years. And what I have left, they would call leftovers. And this is emotionally overwhelming. This is mentally and psychologically overwhelming. They sometimes lapse into depression when they conclude that their health has failed them, and their bodies have betrayed them. Think about that. They become depressed because they feel as though their health has failed them. You know, sometimes you hear that saying, youth is wasted on the young. They just get to the point. So let's deal with the elderly. They get to the point and they think, wow, all of these years, I was productive. I was a productive member of society. And now my health fails me and my body is betraying me. That's overwhelming. And sometimes these are sicknesses and diseases that they did nothing to put themselves in harm's way. And it leads to depression. It leads to emotional and mental anxiety. And it is our responsibility to check on them and make sure that they're okay. So they feel as though their health has failed them and their bodies have betrayed them. Cutler, why would you put it that way, that their bodies have betrayed them? Because there are many times, you all, when they lose control of body functions, and I'm not talking about through their digestive systems, but I'm talking about the ability to sometimes even move, the ability to stand, the ability to feed themselves. They lose sight, they lose hearing, they lose ability to maneuver stairs and steps. Got to be careful. We have to care about them. We have to care about them. Sometimes they become sad when they conclude that their best days are behind them and they are facing a looming, hear me clearly, a looming, impending, and inevitable death that will take them into a truly unknown place. May I be very practical for just a moment? You all do know that I am a person of faith. But the truth of the matter is this: none of us have died and come back with 100% recall about what happened post-death. And so while our faith gives us a space of reprieve, it comforts us. It sort of ensconces our souls to the point to think that all will be well. The practicality and the reality is this: death is a place I've never gone, a place I've never been, a thing I've never experienced. And when I experience it, I don't get to come back and tell people a lesson from it. So what happens? They become sad because they're facing a looming, impending, and inevitable death. And they think, what is the worth of you all please hear me clearly. They think, what is the worth of my life? And many times we don't even pick up the phone. We don't stop by. We don't go to check on them. Not us. It just happens. And it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. That is why I am thankful that when I was growing up, I grew up in a small town. I grew up in a very, very rural area where it was important for us. It was a part of our culture. It was a part of our value system to check on the older people. It was a part of our culture. It was a part of our value system to spend time at the feet of those who were older and wiser. And even if they weren't so wise, they were older. So we gave them the respect that was due to them. I am blessed. I am fortunate to have known 4 generations before me. 4 generations before me. And I pay homage to all of them. And I'm thankful that 2 generations before me are still here. But I sat at the feet of my great grandfather. Some of you have heard me talk about him. I sat at the feet of my great grandfather, who was the son of a slave. And I listened to him talk. And I listened as he spoke. And it was very rare for me to open my mouth while he talked because I wanted to absorb, I wanted to hear, I wanted to know, I wanted to experience. I'm thankful, though, that I was quite frequently afforded the opportunity to open my mouth and share in dialogue with him. But it is important. It's important to check on the elderly. Can you imagine what it feels like to think I've given family, church, culture, I've given them my best years, and the only thing I got left is death. Let's do what we can to lighten and brighten somebody's day. What about a random act of kindness for a senior citizen? What about a random act of kindness for an elderly person? What about that within the next few weeks? Cutler, what can I do? I don't know. Find out what they like. Send somebody a scarf, a candy bar, a card, a call, a flower, something, a visit, a call, a smile. I know we can't do a whole lot within the context of this pandemic, but there are things that we can do. Sometimes when I go home, in fact, I think it always happens when I go home and I sit beside my aging grandmother. Sometimes the only thing I can just do is just hold her hand. I'll hold her hand and I'll put her hand between mine. And I'll remind her that I love you, you matter, someone cares for you. That's what I do. Hold her hand. What about that? And of course, for many of us, it is very McDina, you're going right where with my next question. It is subjective in terms of the elderly, because my mother sometimes say, I remember when we used to say the older folk, and she says, now I am the older folk, but I don't know what age we consider elderly. I mean, I would think, maybe let's say 60, 65. And I know 60 is the new 40. Well, 60 is still 60 years on this earth. How about that? All right. So just anybody that you feel is 10, 15 years older than you, check on them. Just check on them. Let's say at least 65. Let's start checking on people with 65 and older. And I'm thankful because some of you who watch this broadcast, who participate in this conversation, you are spry and you're doing wonderfully and all those kinds of things. What about you remind people, tell them, don't forget to check on me. Because you represent your colleagues, you represent your counterparts. Say to them, don't forget to check on me. Don't forget to check on my peers. You all remind us to do that. Please remind us to do that. Roselia, you're absolutely right. Many times they lose the ability to remember. I want to keep on reading. As much as our elderly may be comforted by seeing their genetic seed in the earth, so they're glad to see their children, they're glad to see their grandchildren, and having children and grandchildren around them, we cannot ignore the fact that not all of them have offsprings. Let's not make a hasty generalization. Not all of them have biological offsprings. And for those who don't, the fear of dying alone is a fearfully overwhelming reality. We tend to see people through our lenses. Let's put on larger lenses. Let's be willing to look through others' lenses. Those who don't have children of their own. Many times, it is overwhelming. It is fearfully overwhelming to think I'm going to die alone. I'm going to die in seclusion. and nobody will know, or they'll find me days later. That's fearful for a lot of them. Not all older people welcome and embrace death like an old friend. They just don't. Some, you all, let's be honest. I know this whole notion of faith. I get that. And that conversation has its place. But we're talking about practicality for just a moment. Some people, some of our older people, they fear death and they suffer insurmountable anxieties in the days that lead to death. They don't welcome death like it's an old friend. And these are the days, you all know I tend to offer these prayers as I offered prayers for the young people. But when these elderly people get to this point and they deal with this insurmountable anxiety, these are the days that we pray that their faith does not fail them, and that the joys of their contribution to this divine creation will sustain them. May they have some joy in knowing that their presence here has built a greater thing called creation, that their presence here has created to a stronger thing that is called humanity, that their presence here has reminded someone else that you matter. You all, let's remind them. I go on to say, notwithstanding all of this, as in the case of our youth, we should encourage, please, we should encourage our elderly as a practical matter. Use your mind, use your heart, use your mouth to counteract the potentially overwhelming moments of life, thinking, trusting, and talking, just as it is for the younger people, it's true for the elderly. We have to remind them that they still matter, that they still have something to give, something to offer. And I deputize all of us. My offering tonight is that we would take on the responsibility to remind some elderly person that he matters, that she matters. Find it in your heart in the midst of difficult conversations. You may know people who might be terminally ill at this moment, but find it somehow within your constitution to pull out of you the ability to say to them, you matter because you still matter to me. I draw strength from the presence that you still have in the earth. Gotta let people know that they matter, you all. That's a heavy conversation. That is a heavy conversation. So here's what I want to do. That's such a heavy conversation. So here's what I want to do. I know I said 1,800 seconds, but I want us to go out still speaking positivity over the elderly people who are in our lives. So we're on word guard for just a moment. I want us to learn to speak positivity over the lives of the elderly people in our moment. Think about an elderly person. Think about yourself as an elderly person. And let's say I am, or he is, or she is, and fill that sentence. I think the word that the letter I'm going to use this evening is A. And we'll conclude our conversation with word guard, using words that begin with the letter A to speak positively in how we describe the elderly who are in our lives, the elderly who have been a part of our lives, ourselves as we become elderly. You all give me some words, some positive words that begin with the letter A. I want to see how we conclude our conversation this evening. Amazing. Absolutely. Think about the elderly in your life. They are amazing. These are wonderful people. Absolutely amazing. Anybody else? Come on. Just give me this. And I'm going to come up with my own, but to be amazing means to still be wonderful, filled with wonder. What about adept? Very, very capable, able to do something. Awesome. They're still awesome. They are an attribute. They contribute to somebody's life. Adaptable. They're adaptable. They still fit somewhere. They still fit somewhere. Agreeable. They still get along. We're still getting along. Some of them, they're older, but guess what? They are alert. They're paying attention. They're paying attention to the next generation. And something about them, I like this word, they are aglow, illuminated by some light that some of us don't necessarily possess. What about that? Articulate, they still have the ability to speak in such a way that it commands our attention. I often find that the elderly are also quite adorable. They're lovable. And I want to go back to that word adaptable, even in their old age, many times they're adaptable because they're what? Willing to change. Willing to broaden their minds, willing to take another look at how they thought about something, how they considered something. They are available for conversation, available to share their wisdom, available to share their experiences through life. They are accountable. They show us how to be responsible members of society. They show us how to set up a system whereby we don't mind being open for correction and saying, listen, let me make sure I'm accountable to and accountable for. They are often affectionate, admirable, held in great respect, advisable. And K Sharp, I like that. They're not only advisable because they will listen, they still will listen to us, and they are also advising. They're angelic. I love that. They are angelic. They possess these wonderful, beautiful spirits and souls that they don't mind sharing. I like that. They are authentic. They're very real. They're genuine. And they teach us how to be real. They teach us how to be genuine. They teach us how to show up and be who we are called to be. I want to thank you all for these words as we pay honor to the elderly. Let's never lose sight of the fact that they too can become overwhelmed. Can you imagine what it's like to feel like you have no more value? But may we all this week, within the coming days, find someone whom we consider elderly, whatever the age, and may we take the time to remind them, show them, demonstrate to them that they matter. And that they matter, if no one else, they matter to you. You all listen, let's do this. Let's keep building community. Let's keep maintaining connectivity. Keep your heads up, keep your hopes up. Stay safe, stay sane. Remind people, tell them, come on, let's talk to Cutler, because we are talking about these things, how to handle life at its most intense moments. I appreciate the dialogue. I appreciate the conversation. I hope you do too. Let's build this family. You all, please know this, from my heart to yours, there is and always will be so much love. I appreciate this. Remember that elderly people become overwhelmed, and we're going to make sure we're going to do our parts this coming week, within the next few days, to make sure we reduce the anxiety in an elderly person's life. Good night, all.